Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show.
Hello and welcome back to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show with Olivia Vizachero. Olivia is a former attorney turned life and business coach for lawyers. She helps ambitious attorneys stop overthinking, set boundaries, and take bold action so they can build a practice and life they actually love. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about how lawyers can stop avoiding the work that actually moves them forward. Miss Olivia, hello.
Great to see you, Evan.
Good to see you too, Olivia. So what are some examples of the kind of work lawyers tend to avoid even when they know it's important?
Business development is top on this list for sure. And the main reason that they avoid it is because of how they think about work. So a lot of attorneys really buy into this idea that they're practitioners, that it's all about the practice of law. And they put that work at the top of the hierarchy, and then everything else comes after it. So when you're thinking about work that way, and you've got this ranking system, maybe consciously or subconsciously, what ends up happening is you create a framework in your brain that says, I can't work on the other stuff until I'm done with everything in that top category. And the way that our work works as lawyers, you're never going to be done with all of the stuff in that top category. So if that's how you think about it, you'll always put the stuff that comes underneath it on the back burner. So business development is a huge one here. The other big one I see is admin. So you'll classify, I used to do this when I was practicing law. I would think about my work differently. So there'd be the substantive work, and then there'd be the admin, or another way to put this is the real work, and then everything else. And so long as you have real work to do, you're going to start there because you're thinking of it as the most important work on your plate. And you won't give yourself permission to do that other stuff until you're done with everything in that first list. And it creates a lot of backlog on things that, like you said, would move the ball forward or move the dial for these lawyers.
So what is usually happening in someone's day when, they keep putting off work that they actually, that would actually move things forward?
So they'll just plan their day that way to start. They will say, I've got to get through these things. And most attorneys are doing what I call wish-based planning instead of math-based planning. So you haven't thought about the time that you have available in your day. You haven't decided start and stop times for work. So we have those bookends where you can get your total time available, less any meetings that you have, and some time for humaning. And you'll have that little wish list. Maybe there's 3 things on it. Maybe there's 10 things on it, but it might add up to much more time than what you actually have available. And then once you get through, in theory, those 10 things, you'll get to that administrative work or that business development. But you plan to do it towards the end of your day, not at the beginning of your day. And their wish-based plan starts to elongate because each thing on it takes a lot longer to complete than what they expected it to. So you run out of time, quite literally, in your day to get to those other items.
So how can someone tell when they're staying busy versus actually making that meaningful progress?
So you want to check in and ask yourself, are there things that I'm telling myself I should be doing that I don't ever get to? And if that's the case, this isn't an issue with your day or your workload. It's an issue with how you're prioritizing your work, how you're thinking about your work, and then how you go about planning. So you're not making or assigning time to those things that you're telling yourself are important that you actually never get to. And we want to shift that. If you're telling yourself that something is important, it should have a devoted spot on your calendar. It doesn't have to be every day, but at least once a week, you should have time set aside to that admin that you want to get done, to the business development activities that you want to do, rather than just leaving it, in theory, on the list that you'll get to eventually once those other things are done. Because every single day, new stuff is coming in. So maybe you complete a couple of those 10 things that were on your Monday list, but then new stuff comes in. So the list repopulates and we've got a new 10 things or a new 12 things. And then again, if 13 and 14 were admin and business development, they constantly stay in that spot in the rotation. They never work their way up to be higher on the list.
So what are some common default tasks lawyers fall into when they're avoiding more important work?
Definitely email. So many of my clients tell me that they get stuck in their inboxes And part of this is just the way that they work on email, the way that they think about it. They're sort of half pregnant between their other work and their inbox. They're constantly task switching, flipping back and forth. And you will lose a ton of productivity and a ton of your time if you work that way. We really want to establish some clear time blocks for processing email. That way, you're not always going in there, responding to things immediately, then jumping back to what you were doing before. Conversations with people, like unscheduled client calls, unscheduled calls with colleagues. That's another big one where you had the best intentions to get to the admin work or the business development, but you just never got around to it because people kept interrupting you when the truth is you allowed yourself to get distracted because you weren't willing to honor a firm boundary with what it is that you said you were going to get done. So those are two big ones. The other thing that will happen is you just get stuck in work. So let's say you're working on something substantive. It's a big assignment. It will take longer than you think it's going to take, and you won't want to get out of it. You'll tell yourself, oh, just a little bit longer and I'll finish this up, even if that's totally inaccurate. And you won't cut yourself off and switch to the thing that you said you were going to do. I understand that's very uncomfortable to do in the moment. But if you want to make sure you get that other stuff done, you have to be willing to either do that if you want to do those less important things later in your day. But my other big tip here is to start your day with the stuff that you say is important that you never actually get to. So with business development, especially, I usually tell my clients, if you say it's important and you never seem to get around to it, make it the first thing you do each day. I've run my own business like that for years. I do my marketing first thing in the morning because your day gets away from you if you let it. So if you start your day with it, there's normally not enough going on that early in the day for things to slip through the cracks and you're able to knock that thing out. Then the rest of your day can be focused on doing that client work. And chances are that won't slip through the cracks the same way the other less important stuff does.
So what are lawyers usually thinking that leads them to avoid this kind of work in the first place?
I call these the lies you tell yourself about the work that you have to do. And I think it's actually really helpful to think about it as a lie because it sounds so believable when we're thinking it in our heads. But it'll be things like, I'll do this later. And in theory, you think you will. But the big lesson here that I teach my clients is I want you to think less in terms of what is theoretically plausible and instead focus on what past data indicates. So theoretically plausible is looking out into the future, and my perfectionists are going to make assumptions or make decisions around like best case scenario. What would the highest version of themselves do in the future? And they'll ignore past data, which would say, every time I tell myself I'll do it later today, I never do. Or every time I tell myself I'll just wake up earlier tomorrow morning and do it, I wake up at the same time I do every day and I don't actually get the work done. Or every time I tell myself I'll work on this over the weekend and I never do. Or I'll do it on Friday before the end of the work week. All of those things, if you never actually follow through on it in practice, they're little white lies that we tell ourselves that get us to abandon the original plan and kick the can down the road. So instead of making decisions based off of what's theoretically plausible in the future, you want to make data-driven decisions. And if you're really honest with yourself, even if you don't love the answer, chances are you're more likely to honor that plan that you originally came up with because you know that white lie that you're telling yourself is actually not going to come to fruition.
So how does this pattern of avoidance start to affect someone's results over time?
In a lot of different ways. So with business development, it slows the incoming work to you. If people have an inconsistent pattern of clients signing with them, you always want to look, where am I being inconsistent? Chances are you create that feast and famine cycle because you get so focused on the work that the business development activity starts to go down. Then you reach a point where the work coming in starts to slow down and you get panicked. So you kick it back up again. And then once the work starts to come in again, you just focus solely on the work. You abandon the client creation activities that you were doing, and then it starts to go back down again, and then you get panicked again, and then you kick it back up. You will stay stuck in that pattern unless your action that you take as far as business development gets consistent. If you want consistent results, you need to be showing up consistently. So that's something that you can reverse engineer. Another big problem that I'll see as it relates to admin is creating a backlog of admin. And the two things that I see this with the most are actually, I'll say three. Number one, entering your time. Attorneys will focus on the real work and they'll tell themselves, I don't have time to do this right now, even though entering their time would only take a minute or two. And they'll just either stay in the work or they'll immediately shift to the next thing. And then your time entries start to pile up. And if you're being really perfectionistic about it, which is something that I used to do, I would tell myself, I can't enter today's time until I enter yesterday's time. I need to go in chronological order, which is such a terrible way to go about dealing with a time entry backlog. It's like throwing good money after bad. You can just pick up where you are, start entering your time today, even if yesterday didn't go smoothly, and then worry about catching up on yesterday's time later. Don't compound the problem and make it worse. But time entry is one. Billing, sending out invoices, that's another one. People will say, like, I'll get around to it when I get around to it. And then you'll create a lot of accounts receivable, but not a lot of money coming in. This can create cash flow problems, especially if you have staff. That can really lead to a lot of stress that is easily avoidable if you just have a system in place for when you invoice. And then another one's email. Even though a lot of people don't do the other things that I mentioned because they're stuck in their inbox, if you're really bogged down with doing bigger ticket item substantive work like drafting contracts, writing motions, things like that, doing a lot of legal research, or just stuck in meetings all day long, the inbox backlog will start to pile up. And then you just start avoiding it. It's like there's so much to deal with there. Like, ooh, it's kind of like the scary monster that we just want to shove in a closet somewhere. And that leads to more and more overwhelm over time.
What tends to happen when someone actually does the thing they've been avoiding?
Immediate relief. It's so funny. I have coached so many people over the years who avoid some of these things that they say are important, but they never get around to. And we will do the thing in the short term that feels more comfortable in the moment. So it probably feels more comfortable to work on the client work, or you just do other stuff entirely that has nothing to do with work. Maybe you're binging the latest Netflix series or hanging out with friends or cooking dinner or scrolling on social media, whatever it is. All the while you're doing that, there's this low-grade anxiety, this low-grade guilt that you're experiencing while you're avoiding the stuff that you said you wanted to be doing. And even though it feels more comfortable in the moment, there's still that discomfort in the moment as well. And as much as people try and convince themselves, I'll feel better once it's done. I'll feel better once it's done. That has not been a compelling enough reason in my experience with all of the clients I've coached to motivate them into action. And one of the things that I've started focusing on more recently as I'm teaching people how to be less of a procrastinator, especially when it comes to these things that aren't as important as the other work, is don't focus on the relief you'll feel once it's done. Focus on the relief you'll feel as soon as you start doing it. We're so focused on the immediate dread or the immediate discomfort of doing the task that we're ignoring the relief that we create from that low-grade guilt, that low-grade frustration with ourselves, that low-grade anxiety and stress. And the fastest way out of it is to just go through the task that you're avoiding. And the relief comes on the front end. It's almost instantaneous. And it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger the further you get into the task. So if what you actually want is to feel better, which most people that I work with do want to feel better, that's one of the reasons they come and work with me, the fastest way to do that is just get into the task as quickly as possible. And you'll actually feel it wash over you. It's wild. And once you know you're that in control of your emotional experience, getting into it as quickly as possible actually starts to become a little addictive because you're like, ugh, this feels kind of gross. I don't like how this guilt feels. I don't like how this overwhelm feels. I don't like how this stress feels. If I don't want to feel this way, all I got to do is start working on that thing. And then you experience it and you're like, this feels pretty good. And the more and more you do that, just the stronger that muscle gets and the more disciplined you become.
So how can someone get started on this important work when they don't feel ready or maybe even confident to do so yet?
One big thing to do is just break it down into the smallest little increments. So if you can just baby step your way through it. All right, I want to write a social media post today as part of my business development activity. All right, what's the first step? Okay, I just need to open up LinkedIn. Okay, open up LinkedIn. Or maybe the first step is I need to open my laptop and then log in. And if you can break it down into these micro steps, you can inch your way through it. And every time you complete one of the micro steps, your brain will release dopamine. And then you can start to ride that dopamine wave. You can also baby step your way through the task at hand. So let me just write the first sentence. All right, let me write the one that comes after that. All right, let me write another sentence. And then before you know it, lo and behold, you'll have a social media post completed. So that's one way to go about it. You can also check in with yourself as you go through that process. So many people will tell themselves it's hard to do whatever it is that they're avoiding. Go through each step. Which part's hard? Is it hard to open up your computer? Is it hard to type in your username and password? Is it hard to open up the internet browser? Is it hard to type in linkedin.com? Is it hard to click the start post? None of that is going to be hard, right? People are all going to respond, yep, that's pretty easy. And then when it comes to writing the first sentence, that's probably where they'll check in with themselves and be like, ugh, that's where it gets hard. Okay, why? If you could create awareness, you are so much further in solving the problem. So you might be thinking, I don't know what to say. And that's the problem that we want to solve. So is it actually true you don't know what to say? If you had to guess, what's one thing you could say? And you might learn some different prompts to ask yourself. What's one problem my clients are facing right now that I could help them with? Or what's an issue I saw on a client matter recently that a lot of people probably encounter? If you can find a more specific question, you can inch your way through that. Or you might not have a problem writing. Maybe it comes out, but hitting post is hard. Okay, why? Are you telling yourself it's not good enough? Are you worried about what people will think? Are you afraid of feeling judged or exposed? Part of the answer might be to change the way that you're thinking about it. Can you define what a good enough post is? What makes something valuable to someone? Can you decide whether you think it's good or not? Or the answer is to gag and go through the discomfort of whatever emotion it is that you're experiencing or that you're afraid to experience. So you might just have to be willing to feel exposed and judged and press post or publish anyways. So if you can break it down, you'll normally find your resistance. That's a good way to go about this.
Oh, okay. So when someone notices they're avoiding something important, what can they do in that moment to follow through instead of putting it off, once again?
So gag and go is a huge part of this. It's accurately describing what negative emotion am I avoiding. And the way that you can figure this out is just ask yourself, why don't I want to do this right now? Whatever the answer is to that question is your reason. And you can ask yourself, if I forced myself to just do this, how would I be forced to feel? And name a one-word emotion. That's the feeling that you're avoiding, that you're unwilling to feel in that moment. And the secret here is to just feel it on purpose. So maybe you're behind on a couple of things that you promised to someone. So you don't want to enter your time because you'd feel guilty doing that and taking even a moment or two away from the task that you were working on. You might be telling yourself, I don't have enough time. Why don't I want to do this right now? Because I don't have time to do this. All right, you might be feeling pressured or rushed or overwhelmed. You need to sit with that emotion instead of just unconsciously or unintentionally reacting to it. Why don't you want to do this right now? Because it's boring. All right, you might have to feel bored and do it anyways. So the reason you're avoiding it will help you identify the emotion that you're unwilling to feel. The other thing that you can do here is shift your expectation. So people might think, I shouldn't have to do this. Where'd that expectation come from? If you want more client work and you're in a role that requires you to develop business, that entitlement to thinking that you shouldn't have to do it, but the work should just come, Wherever you got that expectation from, it's a faulty one. We want to change it. Or you might think, ugh, I shouldn't have to enter my time. Well, if you're in a firm that's how they make money and that's how they bill, we're not just practitioners, we're in the business of practicing law. And there's math behind that as far as dollars and cents are concerned. So that is part of your job. Another thing that I would love people to really get away from doing is having, like I talked about earlier, that hierarchy or that way of ranking their work. Think of all of your work as equal. And just start there. I actually, for my people who want to develop business, I tell them that that's the most important part of their job. If you don't have that responsibility, but you're an attorney who bills their time, I tell people that that's the more important part of your job or most important part of your job. Because if you can think about it as the most important, you'll prioritize it. And my people that are religious, contemporaneous billers, they typically do think about that as the most important part of their job, or at least getting your bills out. That is the most important part of your job. But if you can't get there, if that feels like a bridge too far, just think about it all as equal. There is no hierarchy here. All of my work is real work. It's all a part of my job. It all matters. It's all important. And if that's the case, make sure you're assigning time each day, or at the very least each week, to making sure that you're doing tasks in those different categories. So they're not just falling by the wayside because you're stuck doing the client work.
Good stuff, Miss Olivia. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Evan.
Right. That's it for today's episode of the Less Stressed Lawyer Show. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start making bold moves in your life and your practice, visit oliviavizachero.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, leave a review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.